Welcome to the Thursday podcast, where we interview leading technology executives in ad tech and media. I am Gaurav Chinlur, and today I'm joined by Shrikant Subramaniam, who is a VP and General Manager at InMobi. Shrikant, thank you for making it to this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Shrikant, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to enter the ad tech and media ecosystem? And maybe also a little bit about some moments that stand out in your journey at InMobi so far.
Sure. So I came into ad tech right out of business schools. This wasn't a marriage made in heaven back then. I think you grow into the role. Back when we started, and I'm going to kind of weave in what we do at InMobi. Back when I started, this was like 2012. We had raised a bunch of money from SoftBank, and we were ad marketplace that was catering to India, Southeast Asia, and we wanted to expand west. So the timing kind of worked out. So I came in to do what people would today refer to as online sales. So I came in here to run a small team out of Bangalore trying to reach out to publishers all across the globe. And these were gaming publishers, non-gaming publishers, and trying to make them money on our SDK. So that was the objective function when I started. I think the journey has been amazing even from that day, because what that gave you an opportunity was to see so many 0 to 1 stories so close. Like I can call out like a couple of them. Like there was a game called Hill Climb Racing. Some of you who play might still remember the game still around. So the guy who made that game actually started out of his garage, and for some reason his game came up on the lead list. We called him, we got him integrated on the SDK, and we vividly remember like the first day he probably made like $10-12 in revenue, and this was maybe like early fall 2012. And towards the end of the year, he went on to top the charts on the Apple Store. So he was number one game on the Apple Store, and they were doing significant 5-digit numbers in daily revenues from us.
Oh my God, wow.
Yeah, and then you get to know the people better, right? Like then they start expanding. You start working with them. Like a couple of years down, I actually visited him. They live in a place called Avlu, which is like the biggest town closest to the North Pole. So yeah, the guy came to pick me up at the airport at 6 in the morning. He took me around. He even came up on the papers for exporting the most expensive car into Finland, and
Wow.
he took me out on a spin in his new Ferrari. So yeah, so journey has been amazing. Just kind of circling back to it, I think I started off doing online sales ops. We started putting together a team here. We hit a fair bit of success in that first 9 to 12 months, then went on to lead publisher partnerships for a whole bunch of years, working with the Zyngas and CNN and CBSs or the Voodoos of the world, trying to help them kind of monetize their app on the InMobi platform. Halfway through that journey doing that, we realized it's better that I move to San Francisco rather than making like 6 trips a year. My wife wasn't agreeing to it, that I was here half the time and not here half the time. So we decided to
Right.
move. And yeah, post that, like about half my journey was doing that at InMobi, working with publishers across the globe, helping them kind of monetize their app. We made an acquisition a few years back called Pinsight Media,
Right.
which was owned by Sprint. As part of that acquisition, we came across this app called 1Weather. I told my boss back then that I was tired of doing publisher partnerships and I want to be a publisher myself. And like his only thing was that things don't work out. You have your job back in 6 months. So we started working on OneWeather. That's what I still do. So I run that entity as a GM for that unit. And yeah, that's also in like equally inspiring 0 to 1 journey. Like I wouldn't call it was absolute zero because we had about a million, 2.5 to 2 million users when we got the app. Forward 5 years, we're sitting on like 30 million MAUs. We're one of the largest weather apps in the US, primarily on Android at this point. 30% of US Android consumers use our app to check weather. And yeah, it's been a fascinating journey across product, tech, monetization, distribution, finding users for the app. Yeah, it's been interesting.
Amazing, super fascinating stuff, Shrikant. And being in mobile monetization in 2011, 2012, super early days, it must have been so gratifying to see very early stage small app publishers grow make a lot of money through ads, facilitated by InMobi. That has been such a gratifying stage to see some of this growth to your partners, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's what gives you, like, even to date, and next week you've got GDC, you've got like most publishers coming to San Francisco, and inevitably I don't work on the publisher partnerships team now
Hmm.
very actively, but I already have like three dinner meetings just because you work very closely with these people. You
Right.
don't talk work anymore, but like everybody's kind of woven into this place. I think I kind of say that it's a really, really, really small industry. Like people know each other, people lean on each other, people learn from each other. So yeah, like very happy to be a part of it.
So true, so true. So you touched a little bit on it, but could you tell us more about the user base of OneWeather, more about the app? What kind of users? Are they specific kinds of users that you target?
For sure, for sure. So one weather, when we picked up the journey, this app was primarily an asset that was used for Sprint devices. It was put on Sprint devices, Sprint Android devices to be precise. So it
Hmm.
was, to be honest, a pet project that a bunch of engineers over there kind of started off with. So it wasn't super invested. They would do like an update every 6 months, purely to kind of stay compliant. When we picked it up, we had a really small team, a small tiger team that was set up just to see if this is something that we should invest and double down on. My first thesis was that if this could go on Sprint devices, so could it go on other telcos, other OEMs. So that was ours.
Hmm.
So if you think about any consumer business, you've got three pillars. You've got the distribution, which is how do you acquire users? What's your channel of acquisition? Second one is how do you build engagement? How do you build retention, which is your pure play product strategy, your engagement strategy. And the last one is how do you kind of make money of these users or how do you monetize these users? So between these three pillars, we knew that we had to own one or two or all three, and we had to start with one. So to me, you could monetize your app all day, but if you didn't have the scale coming in, it's anyway going to stay irrelevant. And just to give you the context of existence, like InMobi is still one of the largest mobile ad marketplaces. And when
Right.
you operate inside that large entity, you've got to show relevance. Otherwise, you're going to be really, really small in terms of the investments that you can gauge from the organization. So my first thought was to say if Sprint could preload it, so could other carriers and other telcos.
Hmm.
And if you look at it, about 40% of users just tend to stick with the de facto weather experience that comes on the phone as long as
Hmm.
it's reliable, as long as it gives you the value. And I think we far exceeded that like min bar. Like our app has over 1 million reviews. It's rated 4.6 on the store. Like we care about every single review that comes in. So point in time, we now are the de facto weather app on every single Motorola device sold across the globe. We are on, like I said, 30% of US Android devices sold have ours. So the biggest telcos and OEMs still kind of work with us as the de facto weather app. So that's on the distribution side. I think we did a fair bit of work to kind of make sure that we check all the boxes with respect to weather. That was maybe the first phase of our product growth strategy. And I think in the first 12 to 18 months or so, I think we were beginning to give a fair bit of context to some of the big weather names out there
Hmm.
in terms of like core tech metrics, because I think like as part of the industry, you get to compare how well you're doing on like crash rates, app not responding rates, some of the other tech vitals. So our job was to make sure that we have a solid experience that users kind of want to come back every few hours, couple of days, like 20 to 30 times a month. And that's the
Hmm.
number that we strive for. And I think we're getting very close to that number at this point. And on the monetization side, we knew that was our strength going in. We were part of an ad marketplace. We owned one of the largest exchanges even back then. So we knew that would come in easy. And what we did there was we have a host of people on our teams who have their feet on the street selling directly to the biggest agencies and brands. So they kind of came in with very high quality brand ads.
Hmm. Hmm.
You then kind of bring them in along with regular programmatic demand. We have very large partnerships with the biggest names, Google, Meta, Amazon. We work with them at an InMobi level, and then we kind of factor and bring that in. So I think we've done a fairly good job in creating a very efficient marketplace around advertising, and I think there's been a bunch of case studies published around it. So I think we've done okay on monetization. So across the three, I think we've been able to make some progress, and I think I was talking about this to somebody the other day. Like when you look things month on month, you might not see that picture very clearly.
Right.
But I think the power of hindsight is when you look 5 years,
Yeah.
that journey from say 2 million users to 30 million users
Yeah.
is phenomenal. It like, sorry to keep you on that question, like we were in Mexico City last year,
Mm-hmm.
and the largest telco in Mexico, America Movil, they put us on every single phone that they sell. And we were in a fairly high-end mall, like I remember I was traveling back to San Francisco, wanting to pick up something for the family, and then a colleague of mine was there with me, and we were talking maybe too loudly about one weather, and somebody
Mm-hmm.
random, a random stranger walks up to us
Mm-hmm.
and she says, "Oh, do you work for One Weather? I use it every day. My daughter uses that to figure out what to wear to college." It was amazing to hear. And you are
Yeah.
sitting here in San Francisco or in Bangalore and you're creating something. Numbers are different and people are different. When people walk up to you and say, "This is what I use." And she went on, I think I probably have somewhere a recording that I then later shared with the team. It is amazing to hear that happen. Thankfully, my colleague knew Spanish, so she kind of translated it for me, but it was amazing. So I think
Ab-
the feeling is very real of kind of running, and there's a responsibility that comes with it as well. Like people use our app to keep themselves safe. People use
right.
our app to keep their kids healthy. And I think we owe that to them to give them the best data, the best insights, actionable insights, and that's what we strive for.
Very cool, very cool. No, it's extremely satisfying to get feedback directly from consumers. And you put in so many hours, so much effort, so many late nights to build something that you think is going to be of value, but it's a completely different feeling when you hear it from the end user. So
Absolutely.
it's fantastic stuff.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that you mentioned early on was about the impact that you can make in a short term versus long term. I don't know where I picked up this quote, but I use it a lot with my team, which is most people underestimate what can be done in the long run and overestimate what can be done in the short run. So
Absolutely.
oftentimes you
Absolutely.
might not see a lot of things change month on month, but if you look at it from a longer term standpoint, so oftentimes most people tend to not look at things from a long term perspective, but you'll see a vast difference when you look at things from a long term perspective. Great stuff there, Shrikant. So coming to that, right, so with such a diverse set of use cases, kind of diverse set of user base, what are the data and reporting challenges that you and your team face on an ongoing basis, and are there things that you have done, or is the team structured in certain ways to address some of these challenges?
Very, very good question. Like for anybody looking outside in, a weather app might look like, oh, just another weather app. There are thousands of them on the store. Why are you so invested in building a weather app or kind of scaling a weather app? And I think the devil's in the details. Like to me, the team is data obsessed. So when you make something that's as ubiquitous as weather, you have it on your like smart assistant, you have it on your dashboard, you have it on your watch, it's everywhere. Then how do you stay relevant? How do you still get users coming back to you 15, 20 times a month? I think that's where data comes in. And I think we've across the team, like I wouldn't say just say product, tech, revenue, everywhere, I think we've been obsessed about data and data across streams, right? Like if I have to classify it, we get large amounts of app usage data. Why did somebody open it? When did they open it? What time of the day? What kind of features did they use it? How much time did they spend on the radar? Did they come in through an alert? Did they come in through an icon? Where were they when they came in? Were they traveling when they came in? What time of the day was it? Which time zone are they in? What locale were they using the app? There's a ton of app usage data that comes in,
Right.
millions of rows a day of app usage data. We also, because you're a weather app, you also have some form of a movement data.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody was at location A, he saw an alert, he or she saw an alert, and they decided to move to location B, post that. So that's also insights that we uncover into kind of making some of our product positioning. There's also a lot of weather context data, right? Like that's the data that we thrive on. We work with over 10 weather partners who give us a variety of data sets like air quality, precipitation. We work with multiple government agencies. In fact, we just announced a partnership with the Indian Met Department,
Mm-hmm.
one of the very few companies to have access to their very proprietary data set. And on top of all that, we also kind of superimpose public data sets like what's the average household income in a certain area, or like what kind of place is it? Is that a workplace? Is that a school? So that you inform more about the use. And then the last piece, and I think people tend to ignore this, but we find a lot of value given that we're part of an ad ecosystem, is ad affinity data. Like when you have your own sales team, when you have your own channels of sales, you also say, hey, listen, if Gaurav as a user got an ad from McDonald's versus somebody else who got an ad from Denny's or somebody else who got an ad from a higher end restaurant, kind of tells you more about the user. That's very difficult to infer otherwise without the user telling you. So point in time, we are data obsessed. We spend a lot of time mining this data. And I think that's where like Tercept has come in. You've kind of helped us kind of structure this. And I think we've gotten into the structure very early on. And I think what we're seeing over the last few months is now that we did the grunt work to structure this, work with you, put it in place, add descriptors, add interaction variables. Now we're able to use some of these new age models to get English language insights from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My last meeting was with the person who runs marketing for us, and she was telling me, and she doesn't have a background in tech. She's from a consumer marketing person. She
Mm-hmm.
was telling me that given that we've actually put everything that we have in a very structured format to our agent, she's now able to ask questions like post us sending the storm alert, how many people in the city of Jacksonville move post seeing our alert by more than 50 miles. And that data is available. And it's amazing
Right.
that we have this data available. I think it's thanks to a lot of work that like teams across both sides have put in. Like really kind of appreciate the work that you guys put in as well to make that happen. And I think the numbers are to show. So yeah, it's always
Absolutely,
nice.
absolutely. We have witnessed firsthand how the One Weather team has scaled up their entire business, the volume of data that they handle, the diversity of data that they handle, and how the entire business has scaled up, especially on monetization side. Kudos to the team to have done a fantastic job. And it's also very satisfying and for Tercept to have played a small role in supporting the One Weather team through this growth and this journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So again, coming back to the growth part, right? So are there any specific things that you've done in terms of refining the strategy? Has it changed over time? Did it start somewhere, several years back, and has it changed, to where it is right now? Any specific innovations that you can call out?
So one of the things that when we started off 5 years back, our focus was just the US market.
Mm-hmm.
Like we kind of defined that box to ourselves, saying US is the most weather savvy market out there, and people are obsessed about weather and they want to come back. They care about because it is like some part of the country at any point in time is under some form of inclement weather while I think we owe it to them to kind of give them the right kind of insights, I think the US consumer is also fairly savvy and hence is demanding in terms of the feature sets that they look for in a weather app. So that's kept us on our toes for the first few years from a product standpoint. But I think over the last 2 years, we are also seeing insane amount of interest to checking weather, even in parts of the world that we assumed don't really check weather. And they
Mm-hmm.
might be for a variety of reasons. So we have our web presence in India with over 100 million users. And what we assumed was there's going to be forced nudges to get a user in India to kind of check weather. But that's no longer the story. Urban India checks weather like 7 to 8 times in a month on a decently detailed weather platform like ours.
Wow.
Like it's not just looking at temperature. People are interested in air quality. People are interested whether it's going to rain in the evening. My team members here behind me tell me that it's a very important data point because they decide when to leave office because otherwise they're going to get stuck in traffic. There
Especially
is
in Bangalore, you don't want to be stuck in traffic, right?
I know, exactly, exactly. So I think I think that's one shift that we've seen to say while US is still our top market, it still continues to be very, 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 very important from a user standpoint or a revenue standpoint or a growth standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
We're not ignoring the rest of the world anymore. Like we have significant user base coming in this part of the world, in Latin America, and I think those are markets that we're now investing in. The other piece where we're also beginning to kind of put in a fair bit of effort is to say, how do I so there is also propensity today to pay for weather apps. Like I think back in the day, there is known to be a free platform, but we've been investing a lot into hyperlocal weather insights. So this is as good as saying, listen, if you are on the 42nd street in Manhattan, I'm going to tell you that it's going to start raining at 2:14 and it's going to stop raining at 3:22,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have X inches of rain in that time. I think that's the precision of models, and I think we worked jointly with some of our partners to kind of arrive at these insights.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've been able to, one, some of these features were behind paywalls for most other competitors of ours. What we've been able to do is to democratize that and
Mm-hmm.
kind of get that out to all users. But now we're beginning to feel that if you need to truly deliver value, then maybe the option out is not advertising alone, but also paid subscriptions. So that's one place that we're venturing out.
Awesome. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Coming to the variety of data that the OneWeather team works with, is there a balance that you need to hit? And is there some challenges when you're hitting this balance for data coming in for monetization versus marketing versus product? Is that something that the team sort of needs to juggle on an ongoing basis?
I think it's very interesting that you put it this way, because I think more data is always not great data. I
Right.
think that's one myth to break, because even from app usage data, like I could send 45 events in a session, or I could take the pain to figure out the 8, 10 events that really matter and send those. What that does to you is not just it kills the cost, obviously. Like, and when you operate 30 million users, the costs add up very quickly. And
Of
imagine
course.
30 million users. Some of them, we don't need sessions to get data, because I think they have, half of them have our weather widget on their home screen. So that's constantly giving us inputs into where the user is moving and so on and so forth. So it can get overwhelming, significantly overwhelming. So I think one of the efforts that we put in from a data perspective is what is super important and what is critical, so that we can make the right choices with respect to the product, with respect to interventions. And that's where we've invested a lot of time in. And some of that is also just pure play experimentation, right? Like you start with a big list, but then you kind of prune that down very quickly when you're doing A/Bs. One of the mistakes that we used to do is if you do an A/B experiment, the A and the B would just stay for 1 year. When A would have been killed, and it would be only the B version running. But all
Right.
the events from the A version will also be still hitting a system. At the end of
Right.
the year, somebody would come in and say, your infra cost has gone significantly up,
Right.
and then we would like wake up and kind of kill that. I think right now it's a process, it's a learning, it's a painful learning that you've got to look at your systems, you've got to look at metrics that matter, and then what that lets you do, a minimal set of important metrics lets you combine your data set with the rest of the metrics. Like for instance, product usage data, you can then look at it in tandem with ad affinity data.
Right.
Otherwise, it's become so difficult. Like it's just so insane. So that's one big learning that we've had, and I think some of it has been learned the hard way.
Amazing stuff. So true, right? So at your scale, at 30 million sort of users, right, the volume of data is high, which and it's not just the infrastructure cost, right? It's the way I put it is mind space cost, right? So it's
Absolutely.
costing you mind space, right, to look at so much, on an ongoing basis, and to track 100 different things is diluting your focus, right? So super important to narrow it down, like you said. But touching on that particular point of merging data from different sources, right, and generating end-to-end kind of insights, right? So is there more that you guys do over there, specifically different kinds of data? How do you seamlessly merge it, and what are the challenges over there that you encountered along the way?
So most weather apps don't have user login, I think, or even if we have it, it's going to be for a really, really small percentage of users. So one challenge early on was to identify a primary key or a vector on which you could kind of join these data sets. Like we don't want to use pure play made for the fact that we want to be completely privacy centered.
Mm-hmm.
So we have hashed identifiers that we've now been able to figure out that kind of have helped us create some of these joins, and we use this across the board, right? Like as in the primary purpose obviously is to figure out what's the next feature should we build, or how do we kind of improve a feature, what's working, what's not working, and that's the first question that we want to answer from everything that we do. Second, how do we bring in more efficiency across these pillars? Like how do we bring in more efficiency into user acquisition?
Mm-hmm.
Like while we do telco and OEM driven acquisition, we do a lot of acquisition organically from the store too, or inorganically from the store too. So how does this data then come into figuring out actual lifetime value of a user? And especially for a pure play ad monetized platform, that becomes kind of a challenge, because
Mm-hmm.
some of these numbers are not available at a user level. And then you start to do approximations, and approximations don't always give you the right output. So I think there has been challenge on that front on how do we kind of put this into perspective. So one of the things that we've done, thanks to working with you guys, is to have very specific dashboards created out of this data.
Right.
Like Like one of my favorite dashboards is the health metric dashboard that kind of tells you what's my monthly retention and how's that curve looking for trailing last 90 days, last 180 days. Or I spend a lot of time figuring out the LTV minus CAC equation, and that's a number that I want to keep beyond the threshold because that impacts the P&L in a big way. How do I do look at it by channel of acquisition? How do I look at it by organic versus inorganic? So I think one, you could have millions of rows of data filling in every day. So the first thing is to one, churn out what is actually important to you from a parameter standpoint, and then stitching these workflows together so that you could then have very specific, because the consumer of these dashboards are very different people. Like there's somebody on the growth side who's looking at user acquisition, and he or she is coming back and telling me that, you know what, our CAC minus LTV is almost zero on this channel. So maybe it's not a channel that you want to double down and invest. But there's this another channel that we're finding that it's somebody recently told me that we're the number one weather app in Mexico. We haven't put in significant efforts in kind of growing there.
Mm-hmm.
But it so happened that given that we work with some of the large telco and OEMs in that market, there is significant user interest generated that we get a lot of organic downloads there. So like and this is data tells you very nice stories. So I think it's important for data to be accessible, data to be democratized so that people like, actually not you, but people like me can then kind of look at far more smarter than me. So you can probably look at rows of data, but I think I would need it on a dashboard at this point to kind of make some sense of it.
So true, so true. The ability to merge and unify data to get an end-to-end picture of user behavior and monetization and marketing and everything in one place is the most challenging aspect, right? But it's also so rewarding, right? When you're able to do that, and I'm glad Recept has been able to help you achieve some of these dashboards that you're talking about. And again, kudos to your team to have recognized the need for something like this very early on, and because you invested early on in putting together some of this reporting infrastructure, the results are here to see. So absolutely amazing.
No, absolutely. And I think just coming from an ad tech background also helps you understand the value of like making sure, like even if you don't use some of these things, kind of store it, because you never know how much of history is going to come of use.
Right.
So I think thankfully we did some of those things early on, and it's kind of reaping benefits now.
Awesome. Again, you touched on this early on in the conversation, Shrikant, about AI and agents. Can you tell us a bit more about how the team is leveraging AI to decision making and improving monetization strategies, marketing strategies at OneWeather?
So a couple of things that we do, like I think we're big here on generative AI across the company, both at 1Weather and at InMobi. I think there's a plethora of things that we're doing in the generative AI space, and I think probably over the next few weeks we'll make some announcements too. One place that we use extensive generative AI is in terms of deriving what's relevant to a certain county or a location that the user is in, because there's not always weather trending news. Like it's normally an unfortunate day whether there's a weather trending news, because
Right.
it's typically painful.
Right.
But still, to kind of what we've kind of spent our time is to figure out what's actually newsworthy for your location based on the weather data. Say, for instance, a hurricane might not have hit you today, but if there is a storm formation or a hurricane formation happening to your right, I think it's important that we kind of warn you. So how do we bring in early warning systems based on data? So we've built in some pretty decent systems that, and again, I wouldn't want to say it's all us. We work very closely with our weather partners to kind of build some of these early warning systems and kind of flag it to the user in a very multimodal way, right? Like it is not just a text message that would come in. Sometimes it would be a quick infographic video, or it would be a piece of video that we co-create, or some form of stitch together GIFs for all you care that kind of explains that value prop. And I think to do that across 20 odd countries, and some of these as big as the United States, you can't do this by hand. We've extensively used generative AI to get that. Generative AI content is a big piece for us, and more than content, I don't want to trivialize it as content. It's actually weather warnings, weather alerts that we create, and I think there's been a fair bit of recognition in the ecosystem as well, and from our users, of how these have been super helpful.
Amazing.
That's on the product side, yeah.
And you mentioned about the data that OneWeather has, and feeding the right data. So as access to AI becomes very widespread, the value or the differentiation comes in with the way you structure the data and what kind of data you feed into the AI. So that's where you can unlock a lot of value. It's akin to designing the right prompt, feeding the right data, structuring the data in the right way. Right?
I think people might just confuse what is structuring data. It's not technical work. To me, structuring the data is actually giving the punctuations for the system or the model to understand, oh, what does an ad impression mean? What does a
Right.
served ad impression mean? What's a rendered ad impression mean? You don't want to
Exactly.
assume that the model is trained on it. So you want to give the interaction patterns. You want to train the model on the funnel. You want to give your descriptors to the fields right, and then you have a lot of custom events. And I think this is something that all of us have made mistakes and we've learned it the hard way. Some of our events we assume are self-descriptive because I think we spend so much time looking at these events that we believe, hey, listen, app open today means it's the today page that's open. But I don't think a model is trained to understand that today. So
Right.
you've got to make it very clear. Hey, listen, here is how my app is structured. Here are the three big pages. This event kind of classified. And we've seen the model do magic when you do the right kind of descriptor. So that's the early work that we do. But then it really democratizes data even for somebody who runs marketing. She's able to come out with insights because the data or the agent is very well trained on that data set.
Very cool stuff, Shrikant. So one of the things that you mentioned is the diversification of your monetization models, right? You mentioned subscription revenue and things like so. As the monetization approaches expand, are there any specific tools, capabilities that you're looking to add on to your stack on the data and reporting front to support this diversification and growth?
I think one of the things that we will at some point in this year kind of want to bring in, and there are tools that are out there or tools that we've built ourselves as well in different parts of the company, but it's important to kind of stitch it on everything to your data systems, is to start giving you like integrations or adapters, so to speak, to media buying platforms. Because I think you don't want to leave data in a silo and then have a person kind of infer this data and kind of put it out to a DSP or a buying platform when you're buying users or when you're trying to acquire the right users. So I think the integrations will matter, and I think the time's not far when an agent is now able to and just creatives or choose from a bunch of creatives to which user what creative should go in. I think we're all beginning to see that already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then even on the pricing, like the affordability of the pricing is now, for all practical purpose, a machine written number. It's not something that a campaign manager keys in to say, hey, listen, I'll acquire a user at $1.50. Maybe I'm willing to pay $8 for this user, and for another user, I'm only willing to pay 50 cents. And that differentiation is coming from the data. So
Mm-hmm.
those integrations are already beginning to happen. We're beginning to see it in parts. And I think that's one piece that we'll probably work on to create and kind of stitch it into that same data set.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Shrikant, it's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm sure the TASEP podcast audience will have a lot of interesting takeaways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And it's like this was a free flow conversation, and I think it was talking to a friend, and I think it's always helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shrikant. Have a great
Thank
day.
you. Bye bye.